Did we were we
83. 83 points for Bam Adebayo. He will come out of the game and hear it from the crowd. And we feel you at home.
So I was not watching this as it happened until the very, very end. So I've watched highlights. I don't have the same perspective of having watched the game live to say, wow, there should be, an asterisk next to this 83. I've read a lot about Wilt's 100, and I've got something on that for everybody here this morning. But Bam Adebayo last night against the Wizards in Miami passed Kobe on the list of the greatest single scoring games in NBA history. 83 points. He set the NBA record in the game for the most attempted free throws. 43 free throw attempts. One player, one game. 83. Kobe's 81, which has stood for over 20 years, now moves into third place. Good morning, everybody. Washington's added 2 new free agents since we last spoke. I'm excited about both of them. They are adding defensive starters. It's what we wanted. Starters, contributors, major contributors. And of course, the Max Crosby deal got voided in between all of the news that was going on late yesterday, last night, and even this morning, because Trey Hendrickson has just signed with the Baltimore Ravens. Good morning. It's going to be a short morning, but it's going to be a power-packed morning. We are going until 11:25 because Maryland beat Oregon in the first round of the Big Ten tournament yesterday to advance to the second round of the Big Ten tournament. They play at 12 noon today against Iowa. They are 10-point underdogs in that game, and we will carry that game as we do every Maryland game right here on your home for Maryland basketball, the Team 980. Not a fun season at all. I've been saying something all season long whenever we've talked about the Maryland basketball team this year is they're not very good, but damn, they try hard. And they do try hard, and they've continued to try hard. And they won a game yesterday against a terrible Oregon team. Yes, Oregon is terrible. They're really bad. But Maryland's on to face a team that they actually just beat a month ago, Iowa. If they win that, then they're into the third round, and they'd have to win that just to get to the quarterfinals. 6 games it would require them to play in and win to win the Big Ten tournament and get themselves into the NCAA tournament. That's not going to happen. Michigan's on their side of the bracket, but I give them a fighting chance today against Iowa. They've already beaten them once. Lots of football to get to here on the show. But let's just start with Bam's 83 last night. Look, Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game, March 2nd, 1962, in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I didn't know a lot about it, to be honest with you, before this morning, and maybe some of you do know a lot about it, and certainly some of you who are older know a lot about it. The one thing I know about that particular game is that Sonny Jurgensen, who was at the time the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, played in one of those, celebrity / exhibition basketball games, playing on behalf of the Philadelphia Eagles. I forget who they were playing, but Sonny had 30 in the prelim before Wilt went for 100. Sonny was an incredible basketball player in high school. Could have gotten, a D1 scholarship to North Carolina and other places had he chosen basketball. He was that good of an all-around athlete. But Sonny told me the story many times how they stuck around and he got to witness Wilt's 100 points. The thing about that game that I did not know until this morning is that the Knicks, who Philadelphia was playing that particular night, the Knicks were fouling other players on the Philadelphia team to keep Wilt from trying to get to 100. So for those that say last night, Miami was fouling so that they could get the ball back on offense, get the ball to Bam to try to break a record, a game in which they were up by 20, Any other player would have been sat down long before he was. He played 42 minutes in a game in which his team won by 21. Just to give you an idea, that was 12 minutes more than any other player on the Miami Heat team last night. So they were clearly going for it. And there were, some questionable decisions. They're pushing the ball up 21. They're fouling the Wizards players to stop the clock so that they can get the ball back to try to break the record. But the Knicks were fouling and making an absolute mockery of the game in which Wilt scored 100. So there's perspective in the moment about these things. But I'm going to tell you this, 20 years from now, it's going to be Bam's 83 unless somebody tops it. And I've always thought that Kobe's 81 would at some point be in trouble. There are too many scorers, too many guys that have put up big numbers, whether it was going to be Curry or Damian Lillard or Harden or somebody, at some point was going to really make a run at 81. I did not think it would be Bam Adebayo. I did not think that. He's been a really good player for these Miami teams under Spoelstra, that have just overachieved year after year, especially in the postseason. Like, I think some of the most fun moments of the NBA postseason over the last 5-6 years, Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler, Bam, and whatever else they had around those two, watching them upset teams that were clearly more talented than them in best of sevens in April, May, and even into June. It's a really good player. His high game prior to last night, career high, was 41. And he didn't go over 40 in any other game in his career. 7 of 22 from behind the arc. Kobe was 7 of 13. Kobe shot 20 free throws in his 81-point game. Bam shot 43 free throws. I don't know what it says about the Wizards. Some of you have reached out. This is really an indictment on Alex Sarr. It's an indictment on anybody that was guarding Bam, and it's an indictment on tanking. It's an indictment. Nobody's going to think about this particular game, and it's not a tell at all, in my opinion, as to what they might be when they start trying to win games. The one thing is true about this particular game versus the other two, Wilt's and Kobe's, is that there's no evidence that the Kobe 81 or the Wilt 100 was against a team that was openly trying to lose the game. This obviously is a team in the Wizards who are openly trying to lose games. Not with players throwing the ball away, but with the lineups they play. I don't think this is something you're going to look back on and say, the reason they never became a good team was, highlighted the night that Bam went for 83 against them. It is, the tanking, the trying to lose, 25% of the teams minimum openly trying to lose games. It really isn't a good look for the league. I understand that. I'm not suggesting it is. The irony of it is that the fan bases of the teams that are trying to lose don't hate it because they know it's the way to have a chance, especially if you're a team like the Washington Wizards, who have been out in the wilderness since 1979, and maybe over, that 47-year period. I don't know what the aggregate records are of the teams over the last 47 years, but in terms of playoff success, the Wizards have been the worst franchise over that period, I think, hands down. I mean, they've never been to a conference finals in 47 years. They haven't won 50 games in 47 years. So when you're looking at a team like Washington and you're a fan of the Washington team, I am, what they're doing is the only way they've got a chance. So I'm in favor of it. It's not great for the league, but the fan bases in which their teams are trying to lose don't hate it as much as many of you who are not NBA fans would think. Yeah, wow. 20 of 43 from the floor, 7 of 22 from the three-point line, 36 of 43 from behind the from the free throw line. 7 of 22, behind the arc. 9 rebounds, by the way, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks while he was at it. I'm not going to knock Bam's 83. I'm not going to put an asterisk next to it. Wilt's could have had the same thing for slightly different reasons. I think the thing that you look at more than anything else in terms of the 3 greatest performances in NBA history in terms of scoring points is that the Miami Heat were playing a team that wasn't trying to legitimately win the basketball game. By the way, I was looking at the list of the all-time greatest single game points nights in NBA history. And of the top 27 performances, and I go to 27 because, you can go to tied for 25th, which gives you actually the top 28 performances because there's a tie for 25th. Of the 28, Wilt has 15 of them. Wilt Chamberlain, simply put, is the single biggest statistical outlier in team sports history. There's nobody close to him in football, basketball, baseball, hockey. Wilt's 50 and 25, an average for a season is insane. What I just said to you is insane. 15 of the 28 greatest scoring nights in NBA history are by one player. One player. If you're wondering where the greatest player of all time is on that list, Michael's got one performance in the top 28. 69, and that's the 17th best performance, happened on March 28th, 1990. Wilt had 100 in 1962. All right, I think that is a borderline unbreakable record. I didn't think that Kobe's 81 would stand forever in terms of second place. Wilt also had 78 in a game. He had 73 in a game twice. He had 72 in a game once. He had 70 in a game once. He had 68 in a game once. He had 67 points in a basketball game 4 times. He had 66 in a game once. And he had 65 in a game 3 times. I don't want to if we keep going, he had 63 in a game twice. He had 62 in a game 6 times. 62. He had 61 in a game 6 times. And 60 in a game 3 times. I don't even know what I just read, but I would imagine it's about 30 performances of 60 or more points in his career. I know many people who are much older than I am that are basketball fans, like my father, who simply says Wilt Chamberlain's not only the greatest basketball player that ever played, he's the greatest team sport athlete that ever played. And it is just remarkable to look at his career and to look at the numbers. I mean, the man averaged in 1961-62 50.4 points per game and 25.7 rebounds per game. And then he followed it up with 44.8 points per game and 24.3 rebounds per game the next season. And here's the thing about Wilt, and I know many of you know this. He was such a bad free throw shooter. I think I read this like 10 years ago, something like that. He was a career 54% free throw shooter. If he had been a career 60% free throw shooter, he would have averaged over 50 3 times in his career. Insane. I don't care that the Wizards were on the other side of this. It's just not going to matter to whatever they become next year, the year after, or the year after that. The plan is still in place. And by the way, the most important thing for our team is that they are really, really solidifying with this 9-game losing streak the very, very likelihood that they are going to finish with a bottom 4 record. They are now 4 games removed from the 5th worst record in the league. And why is that significant? If you haven't been paying attention, the Wizards have to finish with one of the 4 worst records in the NBA to guarantee that there's zero chance of losing their protected top 8 first-round pick. And that's what you wanted out of this year. This will complete the 3-year effort to accumulate as many picks and as many young players and trade possibilities, Anthony Davis, Trae Young, to set themselves up for a couple of years minimum of fighting their way back into, top 5 area in the Eastern Conference, and maybe 3 years or 4 years away from legitimately contending. No guarantees, but they've done it the right way. And the last piece of it was to guarantee themselves a seat at the table in the 2026 draft's first round, which they are doing. Incredible performance by Bam, no doubt about it. And he's always been one of those hardworking, relentless dudes. Didn't predict that one, though, in terms of him getting Kobe's. I would have said it's Luka, it's Harden on some night. A couple of years ago, maybe Dame on some night. Maybe it's Anthony Edwards. Maybe it's Steph on a given night. Maybe it's Tatum on a given night. Maybe it's Durant on a given night. Not necessarily Bam Adebayo, but he did. All right, let's get to football next. Washington's made 2 signings since we last talked at the end of the show yesterday. I like them both. More on both of those next.
They weren't flashing the scores down there.
Ward lost the football, scooped up by Chaisson, and it's a touchdown. There is a flag down, but Caleb Chaisson in the end zone with the football.
That's one of the two players that Washington has signed since we last talked. Real quickly, G from the shop. Remember, Sheehan, I had 45 in the Jelliff Summer League versus H.D. Woodson. I'd forgotten about that performance. I meant to mention that. It was in my notes to mention that G from the shop had 45 in a Summer League game. I'll tell you what, last night's defense, just highlight-wise, and I didn't watch it, it looked like Jelliff League, Summer League defense, or Urban Coalition, G, back in the day when I saw Gus Williams with my father come in a white Fila sweatsuit, rip it off, score 73 in about 30 minutes, and walk out of the gym into a limo and leave. Yeah, Gus, the Wizard Williams. Played with the Bullets, won a title with Seattle against Washington in 1979. All right, Washington's added two players since we last spoke. Real quickly on the league before we get to Washington. By now, I am assuming you all know that the Max Crosby deal was voided for what Baltimore claims to be, or the reporting is, a failed physical. And these deals aren't final until 4 o'clock today. And there was a medical contingency, as there should be. You know, I was curious in listening to all of the conversation last night and this morning about this. There seemed to be a lot of differing opinions. Adam Schefter's insistent that Baltimore wanted this deal. It had nothing to do with the Hendrickson price dropping, because the Ravens did add Trey Hendrickson today. All right. This morning, Hendrickson added to a 4-year, $112 million deal with incentives that could make the deal worth $120, so almost $30 million a year, just short of it. $60 million fully guaranteed and a $20 million signing bonus. So that was the pivot for the Ravens after nixing the Crosby deal, is to go to Trey Hendrickson. I was actually going to talk about Hendrickson today from our team standpoint before they signed, Caleb Chaisson from New England, because I still thought there was a chance that they were still in the market for another edge rusher, and maybe Hendrickson's price wasn't what he thought it was going to be in the first 2 days. He ended up getting a pretty good deal, though. Really good deal from the Ravens. But Schefter this morning insistent that this was not shenanigans on the Ravens' part. They weren't getting out of a deal in an untoward way to sign Trey Hendrickson because Hendrickson's price somehow was dropping. Look, the price didn't drop that much. The dude's going to get close to $30 million a year. I know it's not Myles Garrett money or Micah Parsons money, but he's also coming off an injury, and he's 31 going on 32. You know, there were some people that thought that he may not get even $25 million a year. He was looking for longer-term security. The Ravens have given it to him in terms of the years of the deal. The structure of the deal, who knows how it will play out. But there was a feeling when this happened that Baltimore just kind of had second thoughts and some regrets, some buyer's remorse. You know, the medical may not have come back as clean as they wanted, but, you know, for 2 first-rounders, you want to feel like 100% there's nothing wrong with the house, you know, after the inspection. You know, not every house requires an inspection. Sometimes it's, you know, you're taking it in as-is condition. That's not the way it happens in the NFL. Almost every one of these deals is contingent upon a medical exam and a physical passing of the player. I don't know what to believe. Baltimore's done this before. They did it with Ryan Grant, of all people, several years ago. The 2 first-rounders for Max Crosby were totally out of character to begin with. The problem with this, of course, is they have the right to do it if the medical came back and he legitimately didn't pass the physical. If you guys are wondering and you don't know, Max Crosby had meniscus surgery in January, but his doctor believes he's in great shape. He's moving along and things are going to be fine. And, you know, the Raiders went out and spent an S-load of money. Now, they had it. They had the space, but they signed Kwity Paye, an edge rusher. Baltimore didn't go out and, you know, acquire players during that period of time, but they did add Hendrickson today. I honestly don't know what to believe. The Ravens, if they did this deal and in their own mind it was, let's have this thing here. Let's, the physical, it doesn't go final until 4 p.m. Wednesday. And we've got the physical, and we know that, that actually examining him now, just a month and a half after his surgery, we'll be able to not pass him because it's not in, his knee isn't back to 100%. And we'll see what happens with Hendrickson. That's not the rep you want in the league. Agents will say, whoa, we're not going near Baltimore in the future if, the deal isn't actually a deal. What agents may start asking for is for Baltimore, you're going to have to take it in as-is condition. There's no inspection. You're taking it in as-is condition, or my player's going to sign elsewhere, or we're going to trade to somebody else. Now, is Max Crosby still on the market? And if he is it a discounted price? Is Dallas interested again? The reports early this morning is after they had traded for Rashawn Gary that they perhaps weren't. Would teams for, instead of 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, let's just say, that's a pretty big drop in price, are they more willing to accept a not perfect medical? Be interesting to see what happens with Crosby. Hendrickson to Baltimore. Let's talk about our team. So, yesterday was super slow until last evening, and all of a sudden, Leo Chenal, a player that we had talked about, one of the linebackers. I personally liked Nakobe Dean more than any of them, including Devin Lloyd, including Quay Walker. Chenal, though, is a good player, and the money really appears to be a deal that Washington seems to have gotten a pretty good deal on him. 3 years, $24.75 million, so just over $8 million per year. Leo Chenal, if you haven't watched the Chiefs, and most of us have, even if you're not a big NFL fan, you're just a Skins fan, you've seen the Chiefs enough. They've been in Super Bowls, plural, over the years. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. But number 54 for the Kansas City Chiefs over the last 4 years is a player that was drafted in the 3rd round out of Wisconsin. He was a first-team All-American in 2021. He was the linebacker of the year in the Big Ten. And the dude is an absolute freak athletically. He is number 3 on the all-time relative athletic score testing for a linebacker since 1987. Boy, does Adam Peters love his RAS score, guys, because Oweh's a big RAS score guy. A lot of the draft picks over the years have been high RAS score guys. They want athleticism, but they also want, and this has become very clear, in their overall profiling of the kind of player they want in their building. They want the high motor, highly competitive, at times even overachievers. I'm not saying that that's what Leo Chenal is, because Chenal's a terrific athlete. What I've liked about Chenal, like my first, when they signed him, and we talked a little bit about him last week or maybe the week before when we were talking linebackers, because we knew that there was going to have to be at least one off-ball linebacker added if you assume that Wagner's not coming back. When you watch the Chiefs, it was always defensively, because they have very good defensive teams in 23 and 24 in particular. Chris Jones, right? You just start with Chris Jones. Dominant interior defensive lineman, pass rusher. Wherever you lined him up, it didn't matter. He was the heart of their defense. They're well coached with Steve Spagnuolo. You had Trent McDuffie out there. They traded him to the Rams. You had Karlaftis in recent years. I loved him coming out. He's really developing into a good player. But there were 2 players that were always sort of active pre-snap around the line of scrimmage that were hard not to notice. Nick Bolton, who scored the touchdown, remember, on the fumble in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. And then Leo Chenal, number 54. Athletic, fast, relentless, high motor, big hitter, good tackler, impact linebackers, both of them. Those were the impressions you got watching the Chiefs defensively. Yeah, there's Chris Jones. Yeah, there's Trent McDuffie. Yeah, there's Justin Reed. Yeah, there's Karlaftis. Yes, they're well coached, but man, those two backers, they can run, they can hit, they can tackle. They get back in coverage. They do whatever you want them to do. They line them up all over the field. And man, doesn't that kind of start to, you start to envision what the Durante Jones defense is going to look like. There's going to be a lot of people at the line of scrimmage pre-snap. They're going to be moving all over the place. I mean, that's what Brian Flores' defense did. And you needed, another off-ball linebacker. This frees up Frankie Louvu to a certain degree. Look, Leo Chenal is not Fred Warner. I'm not making him out to be. But if he were Fred Warner, he wouldn't be getting 3 years, $24.75 million. He is highly competitive, highly athletic, a really good tackler, super, super energetic and high motor. But he's not Zach Bond. He's not Roquan Smith. He may not even be Tremaine Edmonds. But I like the player a lot. I like the deal a lot. And here we are, defense, defense, defense. When the season ended, it was defense, defense, defense. And now here they have added defense, 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 because they added another player this morning. I'll get to him next. The what do you got is this. I just saw this in between during the break, and Max said he had seen it earlier. How about this story on ESPN.com from Adam Schefter? The NFL is exploring the possibility of playing a game the day before Thanksgiving. The added day to the schedule could come as early as the upcoming 2026 season. And the game would be played on Wednesday, November 25th, the day before Thanksgiving. Obviously, that would be a night game. It would not be a day game in the middle of the week. Couple of things. Number one is that Wednesday before Thanksgiving is a pretty big party night for basically anybody under the age of 30, but really anybody under the age of anything. Wednesday night is a huge friends and family night the night before Thanksgiving. Am I right about that? It's always been for us. I'm assuming, Max, it is for you and your age. Like, yeah. Don't you reconvene with friends the night before Thanksgiving when everybody's back in town?
Yeah, the hometown bar is packed every Wednesday night. Shout out Hard Times.
So that's number one. Okay, so we're going to add a football game into the mix. Number two is it would have to be played more likely than not between two teams coming off a bye week. Now, you threw out they could have played a doubleheader on the Thursday night prior. They haven't done Thursday night doubleheaders on Amazon. So I bet you, the Amazon package and what they pay, are they going to have two options on Amazon? Are you going to run a game on NFL Network and on Amazon competing with Amazon? Probably not. This would have to be two teams coming off a bye because you're not going Sunday to Wednesday. The league played two Wednesday games, if you recall, on Christmas Day, not this past Christmas. That was actually Thursday, the Christmas before, and that they pushed the four teams that played back to Saturday. So they had a Saturday to Wednesday, and it was the same four teams, just different matchups. I think it was Houston, Kansas City, Baltimore, and Buffalo, maybe. I'm forgetting what it was now. But you'd have to have two teams coming off bye weeks to play a Thanksgiving night game. If you had that, you'd have a Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. You'd have a triple header on Thanksgiving Day. You'd have the Black Friday game. And then you'd, have a slate on Sunday and a game on Monday night, not to mention all the college football in between. That is really, from a football standpoint, that's the best weekend of the year. It's ridiculous how good it is. You want the Wednesday night game before Thanksgiving? Kind of always liked waking up on Thanksgiving knowing that not only was there a lot of friends, family, food, drink, but football, triple header all day long. And we kick it off with Detroit at 12:30. Actually, they started that game at 1 o'clock this year. All right. Washington added Leo Chenal yesterday. And then this morning, it was announced that they added New England linebacker Kayvon Chaisson. He was also one of those kind of second tier after Devin Lloyd. I would say after Devin Lloyd, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, there was then, a group of guys that were either right there with Walker and Dean and maybe behind Lloyd, or maybe slightly behind Dean and Walker, and those guys included Chenal and Chaisson. So I really like Chenal as a player. I really liked Chaisson's 2025 season. He had an excellent 2025 season. But his story is an interesting one. He got drafted actually at the end of the first round, or latter third of the first round by Jacksonville in 2020. The COVID draft out of LSU. And he didn't really, play well, and he was injured a bunch in Jacksonville. They didn't pick up his fifth-year option. And then he signed in 2024 with Carolina, but was released before the season started. And then he was picked up by the Raiders, and he was on the practice squad just as recently as 2024. Then, finally promoted to the active roster sometime in the middle of that season in Vegas, or it was a little bit earlier in the season because I'm looking at it. He played 15 games, ended up with 5 sacks, and that gave him the opportunity for the one-year deal last year in New England, where he was on a very good defense and played really good football. I mean, this was a very good season for Chaisson, who really looked like a first-round bust. That's kind of the trajectory of the career. Was, here he was at 25 years old and nearly out of football in 2024. The Raiders give him a shot. He plays pretty well, ends up in New England for a year, and ends up with 7.5 sacks. Big-time quarterback hit number. Really good defensive team. This is a guy that is much more pass rusher than anything else. Sheehan is everything. Like, Sheehan, to me, is a better overall player, a more versatile player. But Chaisson can get after the quarterback. And so now you've had a free agency period in which they've gone defense, defense, defense. Owe, Sheehan, Settle, Robertson, and now Chaisson. I said when the season ended, I'd like to see 3 to 4, maybe even 5 starters and another 2 to 3 major contributors. Washington, in the first 2 days or 2+ days of free agency, they've added 2 edge pass rushers, definitely a 3-down player, and more than just a pass rusher in no way. They've added an off-ball linebacker that can get after the quarterback and is a 3-down player. They've added a D lineman that may be their nose and their base and Settle. And they've added a nickel corner in Amik Robertson. 5 defensive players. Oh, by the way, they brought back the best or one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL. They missed on Pierce. I'm happy about that. They missed on Linderbaum. I'm not so happy about that. Somebody texted me during the break. Who texted me? My buddy Nick said, "Can we still get Linderbaum now that Crosby's back? And will they nix the Linderbaum deal? Will the Raiders do some?" Apparently not. Apparently they've got plenty of money and they're going to stick to the deals that they've made, and the commitments they made since Monday at noon. But I would have loved Linderbaum here. And I even said yesterday, even, the money wouldn't have been that big of a deal in the larger scheme of things. That's a position right now I'm a little bit concerned about. Center. We'll see, how it plays out over the next few months. But the 5 defensive players that they've added leads to this, because you've got 5. You have, without question, 3 starters you've added, in Owe, Sheehan, Chaisson, and, you've got a nickel corner who's going to be out there a lot in Robertson, and you've got Settle. He may be your starting nose tackle. We'll see. He's certainly going to be a part of the rotation with Kinlaw and with Payne. And they're not done yet. There's no way they're done. I'd still love to see another corner. Love to see a corner with some size. But the question that I think that you have to ask yourself now is, since they've added 5 defensive players, 3 starters for sure, and certainly in total 5 major contributors, more likely than not, to the defensive side of the ball where they were horrible. Not to mention you've hired a new defensive coordinator. Hadn't done it before, but we'll see how that goes. They've certainly recognized defense. It has to be better. It can't be what it was last year or even in 2024 to expect, Jaden and the offense to outscore everybody for you to end up having a really good season. They're probably not done on defense, but they've made some progress on defense. I think we can all, even those of you who hate Adam Peters, want him fired, think he's a dope, think that free agency's been a disaster, called it 5 minutes into it that it's a disaster. Even you'd have to admit they have been active on the defensive side of the ball. They've been active overall. I mean, Jalen Phillips, Linderbaum, Pierce, Dobbs signed with the Patriots. They were apparently in on Dobbs. Yes, we want to see a receiver. We need another playmaker. Running back, they didn't get that. But because they haven't signed a receiver yet or a running back yet, but they have signed all of these defensive players, I think the obvious question is, have they cleared the deck enough for you for them to select either Carnell Tate or Jeremiah Love, whichever one's available at number 7, whichever one is the highest on their board? Here's what I would say. I would say what they have done is what they should be doing, and that is essentially creating the environment on draft night at number 7 where they can take the best player available, and they don't have to think about need at all. Obviously, that doesn't include left tackle. It doesn't include quarterback, but it still includes edge pass rusher. I'm not passing on David Bailey because I've got Owe and Chaisson. Chaisson's deal is a 1-year deal worth $12 million. I'm not passing on. I mean, I'm a little bit iffy on Reese because of the production, but I'm not passing on Bailey. And I'll tell you what, it'd be a hard, difficult decision on Bain if he's there. But they've put themselves into the position, which I think you go into a draft. I mean, Charlie Casserly, I just remember over and over again saying all the time, the biggest mistakes you make is when you draft for need. You cannot do that. You have to draft the best players available on your board. But I think with 5 defensive players so far in free agency and a long way to go before we get to the end of April, I think they've cleared the deck a little bit for the possibility of an offensive player at number 7. And I've said this because didn't we take calls on this, Max, like a week ago when I said, I think the question was, would you be upset if they took an offensive player at number 7? I think we did that one. And I think we also did the one, if I told you they did take an offensive player, who do you hope it is?
Yep.
And I said Tate. I actually really believe in Tate. And I think Love is really good. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to be an excellent NFL back. I just don't think number 7 overall is the right spot for him, because if I'm not getting Bijan Robinson at number 7, I'm not taking a running back at number 7. If I'm not getting Christian McCaffrey at number 7, I'm not taking a running back at 7. And I think Jeremiah Love is outstanding and is going to be really good. I just don't think he's going to be them. It is interesting, right, that David Blau came from Detroit, where they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs very high. Obviously, in San Francisco, they valued the running back position because they traded a boatload for Christian McCaffrey. So if there is a belief in that building that Jeremiah Love is going to be the next great back in the NFL, you've got a general manager that believes in that position in a major way. And tried, we think, there was some interest, certainly in Rico Dowdle, and maybe even Kenneth Walker III. So Jeremiah Love is certainly in play. Carnell Tate is certainly in play. And I think they would have been in play anyway had they been the best player available. But now you really kind of feel like 5 defensive players in the first 48 hours of free agency, or we're coming up on the first 48 hours of free agency. They needed, as I said when the season ended, they needed 4 to 5 starters. They needed another 2 minimum contributors. They needed half of their defense to be new faces when they took the field in September, and they're well on their way to achieving that. And you may not like Owe for the money. You may think that Chenal or Chaisson, you could have done better. It should have been Lloyd and Dean, or it should have been Hendrickson. But they're adding quality players for quality deals right now. The Chaisson deal to me is a 1-year deal. I don't think I said this. I think the Chaisson deal is a 1-year deal for $12 million, in part because he's really a 1-year player at this point in his career. And for a very talented and well-coached defensive football team in New England, that team was nasty at the end of the year defensively, and he was a problem as a pass rusher. You got two edges, man. You got two edges, and you got Dorrance Armstrong hopefully coming back off of what was clearly his best start to a career. You've got Dietrich Wise coming back. Absolutely, an edge-setting run defender. You freed yourself up, or you're on your way to freeing Frankie Louvu up a little bit to be, that kind of player. Maybe even, a player that becomes instrumental in the Durante Jones attack. A guy that you can't, really get a beat on in terms of where he's lining up. Is he coming? Is he in coverage? I mean, I think they're doing the right things. The Robertson, other than what's been said about him, tough, competitive, better than the numbers say. Tim Settle's always been steady. All right. What were we going to do next? Why am I forgetting what we were going to? Oh, I wanted you to hear my guy, Steven Spector from Kansas City, weigh in on Sheehan, because Sheehan has been a Chief, has been a fan favorite in Kansas City, has been a two-time champion. Steven's covered the Chiefs for the last 13, 14 years as the program director out at the sports talk station, 96.5 The Fan in Kansas City. He'll join me for 5-6 minutes to weigh in on the Leo Chenal signing. We'll get to that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
This is March Madness.
Richardson against Padula.
City for the leading sports talk radio station, 96.5 FM. Steven's an on-air talent as well. And he's making time, not a lot of time, because I told him I'd keep him for just a short amount of time because he's at the Big 12 basketball tournament right now. But he has stepped up to the concourse level and is going to share his thoughts on Leo Chenal signing with Washington. So let's start with that. What's Washington getting in Leo Chenal?
They got a 3-down linebacker who does a lot of things, can also play special teams. He's a guy that Steve Spagnuolo loved to use in a lot of different settings, whether it was rushing the passer and coverage. Very good on first and second down against the run. They kind of got a jack-of-all-trades, fan favorite linebacker in Leo Chenal.
Fan favorite linebacker. Why do you think that he didn't re-sign in Kansas City? Why didn't they fight to keep him?
I think after a 6-11 season, after 7 straight, AFC championships and Super Bowl appearances, I think the Chiefs are in the mold of turning over the roster and not continuing to keep the guys that are currently on it. And they're in a little bit of a cost-saving situation. And I know he didn't get a ton of money, but $8 million for a luxury linebacker is not where the Chiefs are at right now. I know they would have liked to have kept him. I know Steve Spagnuolo would have loved to have kept him as well, but this is probably just one of those situations where the Chiefs are at as opposed to where the player is at.
Washington has flipped their 2 coordinators. They've got a new offensive coordinator, David Blau. Cliff Kingsbury's gone. They hired Durante Jones from Brian Flores' staff in Minnesota to become the defensive coordinator. The base defense we expect will be a 3-4. What kind of linebacker is he's an inside linebacker in a 3-4, correct?
He's probably an inside linebacker, but Steve Spagnuolo did a lot of multiple looks, and one of the guys that he liked to do that with was Chenal. So a lot of times you would see him first, second down, kind of in the middle of the field next to Nick Bolton in the Chiefs 4-3. But on third down, he was a guy that Spagnuolo liked to blitz him off the edge or even up the A gap up the middle. So I think you could, again, I think he's a jack of all trades type of guy. And I think, depending on how the new Washington defensive coordinator wants to use him, he can do all those things. So first, second down, good in the run. And in certain situations, I think he has shown the ability to pass rush, but it's not something that he has consistently done here in Kansas City over 4 years.
He had a ridiculous, RAS score, the, relative athletic score back in 2022. It was, basically it ranked like 4th out of 2,100 plus linebackers from 87 to 2022. Where did that athleticism sort of show up the most?
Sticking his nose where the ball is. It's funny, everybody talks about his athleticism, and he's truly a great athlete. I would say where it doesn't show up, just if you're watching the game, is I'm not sure he's a great coverage linebacker. And I know that sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. Here's this athletic freak, should be able to cover the tight end, the running backs. I don't think that's his strength. I think his athletic strength is getting downhill, abusing, some of the linemen on, as I talked about on that pass rush, but he's really a guy that sticks his nose in everywhere. So, yes, an athletic freak, but I don't look at him as like that sideline to sideline linebacker that can go out and cover a tight end 30 yards down the field. That is not what I would consider it to be his strength, despite that athletic score.
You said a fan favorite. What kind of guy was he in the locker room?
He was a 3rd-round pick out of Wisconsin, and he started slow, but he's a quiet guy. He's reserved, but again, when he sticks his nose into those piles, or he's driving a quarterback back or pushing an offensive lineman into the backfield, those are the plays that got people really fired up here. But
is there any game that jumps to mind when you think of Leo Chenal?
I'd love to tell you that there is. There's not, though.
Yeah.
He's just a steady winning football player. They drafted him 4 years ago. They went to 3 Super Bowls with him. He's done a lot of different things, but it's not like there's this one Ed Reed type play that sticks out and he's got some great, YouTube highlight mixtape. That's not who he is. just a winning football player that you want on your football team.
Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. I know you are at a Big 12 tournament basketball game. Appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Stephen.
Sounds good, Kevin. Thank you. Anytime.
Steven Spector with thoughts on Leo Chenal from Kansas City. Jumping on with us right now is our Skins Insider, our Commanders Insider, Ben Standig, at Ben Standig on X, on Twitter. Subscribe, honestly, for $5 a month or whatever it is to read him on his Substack, cover this team. It's totally worth it. He's got a podcast as well called Last Man Standing. So here we are, 5 defensive players added. Before we get to the most recent players since we last spoke, I am reading all over the place, including from Jeremy Fowler, that Washington was in on Trey Hendrickson until maybe the very end before he committed to Baltimore. Do you think that that is the case?
My understanding is that they were like involved. I don't know that they were like the leaders even before the Ravens got in control, but I don't, we've already seen, obviously they've gone for the big ticket items here or attempted to in free agency. So the only thing that would be surprising me about that a little bit is just simply that Trey Hendrickson's, 31 and, would be going sort of against the youth movement. But in terms of being the aggressiveness of, again, they tried for Pierce. They were, according to others, they were reportedly in on Linderbaum. We know about Dobbs. So, like I said, from what I gather, they were in discussions, but I don't know that they were hardcore, the team to beat or anything along those lines.
All right. So I haven't talked to you on the air since Monday. I'm just remembering that. And they've added 5 defensive players, multiple starters for sure, and pretty much all contributors. I don't think any of these signings are players that you get to the end of August and, oh, by the way, they released him. There are occasional signings that are potential, late August, early September cuts. None of these so far, clearly. So what's your take on what they've done so far through coming up on 48 hours?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have gotten younger. All 5 of the guys are
point.
under 30. Chenal being 25. Ironically, Tim Settle, who we saw as a rookie, is the oldest at 29. So, yeah, I mean, that's, a huge deal there. The fact that we all thought they should have gone after the defensive ends, edge rushers last year, which oddly they didn't. This year they were like, okay, we're going to fix that. And they get Oweh. And now they signed Chaisson. So, that's needed. And that's a position where if you make that move, if you get the right guys, it changes the whole game because now the back 7 doesn't have to cover as long, et cetera. So all that's good. Settle gives them another interior option. At a minimum, it sort of upgrades that 4th tackle or that 4th tackle spot from a year ago when it was guys like Eddie Goldman and Sheldon Day and so on. I'm still struggling to figure out exactly what this is going to look like from a base perspective. Is it? Right. I know that we're talking 3-4-4-3, but that can be. I don't know if either of the ends are really 3-4 ends. So anyway, that's for a discussion for a longer day. But they obviously have more talent there for sure. Meek Robertson gives them another corner. It almost kind of feels like, I think you brought this up the other day, that the Vikings with Brian Flores played more base than anybody. So now when you see, like, if they really are sort of going more like 4-3 at times, they've got linebackers now and they've got the front. So it would make sense to think that Robertson maybe is what we used to call the nickel, like when they would bring in a 3rd cornerback, but not necessarily like a guy who's on the field at all times. So yeah, I mean, I think all those moves are, pretty good. They're taking not flyers, but they're shooting for upside with Oweh and Chenal in particular. They're not aiming for what they've done. They're aiming for what they think they will do. I mean, Chenal, I talked to somebody over in Kansas City, and like they did not want to lose him, but they've got salary cap issues and they've had to lose a lot of guys. But they're just that one of those guys that's just every coach, every team just loves. The way he plays, hard worker, he could play all over. When I read his bio, I didn't include him in my free agency guide initially. But when I started looking at him more, and I'm like, wait, this guy plays everywhere. Oh, this guy screams what I think
Minnesota.
Durante Jones wants to do. Yeah. So that part makes a lot of sense, and I like that kind of move. So yeah, I don't really have any issues with what they have done so far. You never know what could have been, but yeah, I've liked what they've done so far. Sure.
Yeah, and I think some of what is done too, you have to think in terms of what they believe it'll do for some of their existing players, like Frankie Louvu is an example. I would find it very difficult to believe that Durante Jones isn't impressed with Frankie Louvu's potential as a player in his defensive system if it resembles the Brian Flores system. So that's some of these players, even a Jordan McGee, even potentially somebody like the athletic Tyler Owens. How does it free up for what they want to do with the players they had and they really couldn't do last year or the year before? What do you think is next on defense?
Look, they still need some depth, right? Like if it is more of a 3-4 look, I don't know who the fourth linebacker is necessarily. I mean, Kane Madrano is there, and he's very athletic, but he just didn't play really defense as a rookie. So I think that's a spot. They don't have a ton of size at corner. Sanderson and Robertson are both 5'9", give or take. When this whole process started, and realizing okay, you can't realistically solve all your holes in one season. What are some position groups that you could maybe get by with? Safety was sort of a get by with position, depending on what Dan Quinn really thinks of Quan Martin after sitting him towards the end of last year. But, again, Quan Martin, I think, is maybe the number one guy who could benefit from a new coordinator, a new system. He just didn't look comfortable in what he was in. So maybe there's something there at safety that would be something. But other than that, I can't imagine they're going to add another defensive tackle. You could certainly add more depth at defensive end. I don't think Jacob Martin is now back. I don't know. We'll see about Von Miller. And of course, there's always the draft with any of these things. So yeah, I would just take another linebacker and then just depth kind of elsewhere.
What do you think this does so far with the 5 defensive players and maybe more coming? I think there's, an immediate reaction from fans that say, well, that means they're going offense at number 7 in the draft. What do you think?
I don't think it means that. I mean, if you tell me that Jeremiah Love is there, do I now give that a little more bump than I had before, or if they hadn't done this? Yeah, sure, I could buy that, but I wouldn't sit here and go, my next mock draft will automatically have Carnell Tate at 7 just because of what's transpired here. I mean, Chaisson only signed a 1-year deal, so we're going to go into next offseason most likely going, okay, well, what are they doing at the other edge spot? So they could still draft, if Bain or Bailey or whoever is there if they like one of those guys. So no, but yes, as it stands right now, when you've gotten 5 players and they're all on defense, you got to be asking where's the offense. And also there is the point of not just that they haven't signed anybody, but if Terry McLaurin is, if he really is kind of possibly going into the last year on his current contract, then who is going to be the heir apparent. So there are some reasons to think that, but I wouldn't say that anything that's happened is going to automatically sway me to say that they're definitely going offense or anything.
All right, we're talking to Ben Standig, of course. By the way, Maryland, Iowa, and the Big Ten tournament will have the call, including the pregame show, coming up here shortly on your home for Maryland basketball, the Team 980. So, look, they swung for Alec Pierce. They swung for Tyler Linderbaum, 2 offensive players right at the beginning on Monday at 12 noon. And yet, the only offensive player they've signed is a player that played for them last year and the year before, Marcus Mariota. I think we both thought, a receiver would have been signed at this point, maybe even a tight end, although you really backed off the tight end thing, a running back. And none of those players have been signed yet. So where are they on wide receiver, running back, and tight end?
Yeah, obviously we only know what's been reported or if I've heard something or, so you mentioned the guys they have looked at. So I don't know how hardcore they were potentially in running backs. Like I'd heard they weren't in on Kenneth Walker, and ultimately they were not going to get involved in the Tyler Algier thing at the end.
But Dowdle, yes, right? There was interest in Dowdle.
I don't know. I haven't heard that. If somebody else put that out there, but I hadn't heard that. I don't know.
All right, go ahead.
But yeah, no. So I mean, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but and again, maybe at tight end, I don't think they were in on Isaiah Likely, but there's still Chigga Congo still out there. Maybe they still make a splash there. But yeah, they are getting to the point where it is threading a needle time if they're going to make this look like, wow, they really made some significant upgrades. Because at running back, you're pretty much looking like Rashad White, who we've talked about a ton.
Yep.
Because of the connections to Jaden Daniels, and he's a pass catcher, but he's still out there. Like the way the money's getting thrown around, if you're telling me 2 for $8 doesn't get it done, I don't know what we're doing. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there's not as much interest as we all thought, but he's still there. And receiver, boy, I mean, if they were going to get Jawan Jennings, you'd think that'd be a done deal by now, right? I mean, he's a guy that Peters drafted. If we're going to play the game that we have with Debo and Brandon Ayuk of, hey, they know Adam Peters, they should get this done. Well, Jennings is like even a better example of a guy that Peters drafted. Those guys were picked high in the draft. Everybody knew that. A 7th-round pick who turned into a stud, that's different, and yet he's still out there. So there may be, reasons why Peters is not interested. But if you go past him, what are we looking at here? Darnell Mooney, Keenan Allen, Hollywood Brown, like nobody that's going to be like, wow, they've really improved. It looks more like the 2024.
No, I mean, you're into Ayuk, and you're into Ayuk. Is that what they're waiting on?
Well, I don't think so, because they wouldn't have gone hardcore for Pierce and Dobbs if they
well,
were.
You got a plan B and a plan C.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if Ayuk comes in. I just like I don't know. Like we've discussed this. I don't think either of us are necessarily on board with going with all the, whether it's the injuries or the way things blow up in San Fran. But it sounds to me like if they were making hardcore pushes for Pierce and Dobbs, they were at least saying, okay, we don't completely trust Ayuk either. We'll see what happens.
Right.
I still don't understand how you could trust him completely. But even also, like, let's just say you get.
I'm with you on that. I'm just wondering what they're thinking and whether or not he's down, a plan C or a plan D, because they have to add a receiver. We agree on that, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can't believe that they haven't yet. Again, like the Pierce thing ultimately to me seemed like, again, I was told that they were right in it and the money was there or whatever, but like he wanted to stay with the Colts. So there's not much you can do about that. And, if you're Dobbs and all things are equal, I'd probably go to the team that was just in the Super Bowl over the other team coming off a 5-win season. So,
with stability at head coach, like obvious stability.
Yeah, and they also have a young quarterback who's ascending, so it's all it's just a more attractive situation, presumably. So I don't look again. Jaden Daniels walks on water his first year, and I think maybe we just think that's forever, and that's obviously the world is fickle, gets hurt, things change, and between the fact that like Zach Ertz presumably at a minimum won't be back till late in the year, and I don't even know if he'll be on the team, right? So no Zach Ertz. They still don't have at the moment some kind of passing down back the way they did with Eckler in the first year, and the other receivers, they're not just missing it's not just the one outside receiver. Right now, the slot would be Jalen Lane or Luke McCaffrey, two guys who there's promise, but we have no idea. So, oh, by the way, we haven't even mentioned the left guard and center spots are up in the air. So, it's odd that like if we started the season today, I could probably figure out what the defensive lineup would be. The offense is a lot more questionable. Yeah. So they're just running out of options. And you never know. Obviously, something could come up, a trade or whatnot. But like in general, they are really starting to get up against it if they want to make significant upgrades. And I just can't imagine, even if they bring on Ayuk, I just can't imagine that they think he's like they're ready to go. That he's the answer. That's like playing Q, even if they wanted to sign him on as a guy like just to take a
it'd
flyer.
Be interesting if all of a sudden it's like Ertz, Debo, Chris Paul, and even Eckler are in the mix. Because we'll leave it at this because I got to run, but none of their own have been signed elsewhere at this point. All right.
That is the craziest thing. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah. All right. Ben Standig, everybody. We have a short show that is now ending on this Wednesday. Maryland and Iowa coming up from the Big Ten tournament. Terps won last night against Oregon, and they are at it again today, coming up with the pregame show after this. All right, we're done. Back tomorrow.